Hello, friends. Robert Bevan here, author of the Caverns and Creatures series of comedy, fantasy novels, and short stories. With me is Sam West, and today we're talking about the spell Enlarge Reduce. Ah, this, I don't know, all kind of wacky hijinks occur to me.
Yeah, I really want to love this spell. I really do.
However,
There is a however.
uh-oh.
I have seen this spell cast, I think, like a handful of times. I've seen players take it more than a handful of times. I have yet to really be like, wow, that was so cool. I'm like, great. It was divine favor. Like, that's most of the time where I land on it. And that's kind of a bummer because the spell sounds really cool.
Yeah, it does. All right, well, how does it sound exactly? What does it do?
All right. This is a second level spell for sorcerers, wizards, and artificers. Mainly just sorcerers, wizards. If you're an artificer, it's a taller order, but that's not important. Because what is important is it takes an action to cast. It's got 30-foot range. It requires a pinch of powdered iron as its material component. It's got a duration of a minute with concentration, which is, always a bummer, but it's not the end of the world. It includes I'll just jump right into it, actually. So you cause a creature or object you can see within range to grow larger or smaller for the duration. You choose a creature or an object that is being neither ward nor carried. If it's unwilling, so it's an unwilling creature, it makes a con save. On a succeed, nothing happens. If the target is a creature, everything it's wearing and carrying changes with it. That's important. Any item dropped by an affected creature returns to its normal size at once, which means, like, if you disarm something, it shrinks down. Notably, it does not get bigger when it's picked up again, should the creature have been enlarged. An enlarged creature size doubles in all dimensions. Weight multiplies by 8. It increases its size from medium to large or small to medium, or from tiny to small, or from large to huge. If there isn't enough room for it to double in size, it fills the maximum possible size in the space available. Until the spell ends, the target has advantage on strength checks and saving throws. Its weapons grow with it, and it deals a bonus D4 with those weapons. Reduce is, I think, the more interesting one, but it's like not that different of text. It has the creature size going downside category, so large to medium, medium to small, small to tiny. Until the spell ends, disadvantage on the strength checks and saving throws, as opposed to on advantage that Enlarge does. And it shrinks their weapons to do minus a d4 instead of plus a d4. It's just weird, right? Notably, speed stayed the same. You still are, if you're a tiny halfling, you still have a 25-foot move speed, and you're just sprinting across at like what looks very silly as you look at little feet. Alternatively, you don't move any faster if you're a gigantic hulking oak, which I guess that kind of makes sense. Like I can, envision it's like, oh, I'm clumsier and larger, and it's that envisionment. But like fundamentally, what this is giving you is advantage on grapple checks and a d4 extra damage when you're larger, and a d4 less damage when you're smaller, and disadvantage on grapple checks. That's functionally what I've seen this spell do. It also notably doesn't say a lot for the object. It just says that the things, like, it doubles the object size or halves the object size, which I'm positive have to have some weird implications, especially when you're talking gargantuan objects, because doubling the size of a gargantuan object seems pretty good. But I don't know specifically how that works, and I'm a little bit concerned to figure that out. In any case,
does a mountain count as an object? Ocean?
I'm gonna guess ocean. No, I don't know. This is a weird little second level spell. Bob, where are you at with it?
I like it. This is another one of those things where you come at me with, how are you going to use it? I don't know, but I feel like there are a lot of ways it could be used. That it's limited only by your imagination, and I like that about it. I feel like a lot of stuff could be done with it.
I think most of the stuff that could be done with is probably in the object realm, which is not necessarily intuitive because that gets like a loose reference. Most of this is talking about what it does to creatures.
Well, I mean, I got to imagine the weight thing ×8 would account for objects as well.
Yeah. Same with like it can't exceed the space it's in.
Like, all right, let's say I weigh 200 pounds. I pick up a recliner.
Mhm.
They cast it on me, both me and the recliner. We weigh like 2,000 pounds now, and I jump just because I want to smash through the floor.
Sure. Yeah, I guess like that's a neat application for it. And I'm sure there are lots of neat applications like that for it, where it's like, what can you do with 8 times the weight? And that's probably a more interesting question than I've normally thought of with it. Again, I really want to like it. I want the spell to be good for that reason. I want the spell to be the kind of thing where it's, wouldn't it be super nifty if we made the, the key tiny so we could hide it easier? You could just hide it in your back pocket. Wouldn't it be easier if, what do we enlarge you so you can break the floor? What do you just take an axe to it? Like, I don't know. I struggle. And I guess like, there's stone, maybe the weight is different. I struggle to see those fun use cases happening all that often. I struggle to see it being a particularly interesting tool. Like, what benefits is larger going to have on you most of the time? I think smaller is probably more of an exploration benefit, but like we already have environments meant for small to large creatures to exist in an adventure anyway. So tiny is where you really want to be for that to start being interesting. But even tiny, you're still like a foot tall, and Find Familiar already gave you access to that. So like tiny exploration doesn't really change all that much. I guess you can now hide a tiny person in a backpack, but you could already kind of hide a small person in a backpack. It just, the scaling is just always a little bit awkward to me.
Could you ride your Flying Familiar if you're that small?
No, because your familiar is already tiny and it has to be a size larger than you for mounted to combat.
You could ride your animal companion.
You could ride like a falcon. That's true. Small beasts you could ride for a minute.
Yeah, that's fun. Who doesn't want to do that?
Agreed. I think it's fun. I think it's neat. I think it's cool. I think this is a really great racial spell to get, like Drogar get it. And I think that's a really great place for it to exist in, because I don't think you should be putting this in your sheet for a cost. I think this is not a second level spell that justifies existing on your sheet, because I don't think it's getting cast all that often. Like at its best, I think this is a second level Divine Favor on your Paladin and making them block the entryway, which neat. You put this on like a Polearm Master or a Sentinel and they can just lock down a slightly larger space.
I was thinking similar to that, cast Enlarge on your enemy so they can't get through the door.
Cute. There are spells for that, but like that is another use that the spell has, so it's not necessarily the end of the world. There's some notable things that are missing from the spell that really annoy me. The first is like being larger doesn't extend your reach. Like I really wanted it to give my weapons an extra 5 feet of range.
Yeah, or the speed. That's weird.
Yeah, I really like making something small from medium has very low impact. A D4 less damage is decent. There aren't a lot of things that reduce damage this way, but like I really wanted it to hamper just slightly more. It feels like they cut a lot of the possible rules here for size adjustments, because like back in 3.5, back in 2, there are huge, ridiculous tables talking about the variations in size and penalties for things, and miscellaneous modifiers for tiny, small, medium, large, and the varying weapon sizes, and just a whole lot of big old tables that have been kind of condensed down into this little 2-paragraph explanation of how this works. And I find it a little bit lacking, and I wish this was a spell they did maybe commit a little bit more to the complexity of it to make it more of an engaging and interesting dynamic spell, because where it is currently, you're larger in weight and you're larger in a D4 extra damage, and that's kind of it.
Yeah, D4 extra damage. I mean, I get it. It's a second level spell. You can't make it too powerful, but I feel like 12-foot tall me with a sword twice as big is going to do more than D4 more damage.
Yeah, it makes me really wish that they made it scale with the weapon too. Like I would have loved to see this say it does an extra weapon die of damage, because then you have things like the greatsword only doing 3d6 damage, which is still a lot of damage. Don't get me wrong, 3d6 damage is like a bus. But now your great axe is doing 2d12 damage, and you feel like the giant that's smashing things with the giant or the great axe, right? Like that fits within the fantasy. It also notably is normally outside of that character class. Normally that is then a wizard. It is in fact another character class. Only 3 classes get it. It's the wizard or artificer or sorcerer sticking Enlarge Reduce on the barbarians, and then they now have a 2d12 axe. That's a supportive supplemental feature that gets 2 classes working together in a cool, powerful, interesting way. That feels like where the spell could be at. It feels like that's not out of the realm of it. And they're like, nah, it's just like I keep mentioning Divine Favor, and I'm gonna literally pull up the text right now. Divine Favor, I'm confident, is just for the duration, the creature gets a D4 bonus radiant damage on hit. Yeah. It's only you, but like it's the character you would cast on anyway. It only takes a bonus action, and it's same duration, same concentration. It's a first level slot, and does functionally what you'd want this to do in combat. It's kind of a bummer.
Yeah. But again, second level spell.
It isn't. Yeah, it's not a tall order.
Now that thing about it was, if you enlarge something in an enclosed area, it only grows to fill that space.
Yes.
So you're not like putting someone in a cage and then crushing them to death.
Correct.
Unfortunate.
I mean, if you ever if you're in a tight corridor and there's a doorway, you can just enlarge someone to get stuck. That is a thing, like you suggested prior, that does work. It's just that's where it caps out.
But I mean, also, all right. How about this though? You shrink somebody, shove them in a cage that barely contains them. What happens when the spell wears off?
I would rule it breaks the cage, but that's not written anywhere. So,
all right. Well, what if it's not something breakable? What if it's like a, I don't know, some really strong iron box?
It's hard to envision. So it has if we're talking magically unbreakable, that's where I think we're in the category of, okay, what's weird going to happen? If it is regularly breakable, I think the force of a person going in less than a fraction of a second from 3 feet to 6 feet tall is a tremendous amount of force that probably breaks out of most things. But if it's like an indestructible magic, container that's like, yep, this cannot be destroyed, that's where your mind is going to vary on this question to anyone you pose it to. My answers aren't objectively correct, right? I'm making shit up, but this is what I would think it would do. I would probably rule the person is stuck that way until they're out. That's how I would rule it. That, or they're magically shunted to a space next to it, or if you have a really grim DM, maybe they get squished into a bloody pulp and explode. I don't know. Again, your mileage may vary.
I'm thinking your first option was right, because that goes along with the limitations of the enlarge. That's the least fun though.
Sure. Agreed. Them just being stuck for a little while longer is not them getting squished in a little bit of paste or using it as a neat teleportation trick. I think the coolest applications this have probably involve disarming. Maybe you use this to so there are rules for oversized weapons that exist, but those are mainly only for monsters. So I was thinking maybe you do some house ruling / a little bit of dealing with your DM to be like, oh, we killed that fire giant, I want to wield its axe, it's way too big for me, but if I enlarge, now I'm large and only one size smaller than it, so I can attack with it with disadvantage. And then you can figure out some ways to maybe use oversized weapons with Enlarge Reduce that could be neat. This spell has a cool fantasy. I like the idea of, you growing to enormous sizes, you fee-fi-fo-fum your way and squish people. And just the mechanics of it don't match with that fantasy to me, and I think that's a bummer.
Or, here you go. You have a really fast exchange with a merchant. You give your buddy a bar of gold, enlarge him. Oh no, once he releases the gold though, it shrinks. Never mind.
Sure. I will point out once again though, this has some wacky applications for things that are already very big. Yeah. Taking something from 32 feet across to 64 feet across is a very big difference. Where 6 to 12 feet doesn't feel that large. 64 doubled is real big. Same, taking a Kraken from gargantuan to huge, very big difference. It no longer can wrap itself around ships. It has a much harder time being a big war machine of destruction and disaster. Oddly, Enlarge Reduce is way better on upper tier monsters because shrinking them a size category matters more from what they're able to reach from the sheer quantity of space they take up. Maybe that's a thing you consider. Those things probably have legendary resistance, but that's, if they're bringing on a second level spell slot, you're super happy with that.
Do you think this is an oversight on the part of the writers?
Yes, 1,000% I do. Well, I don't think they intended this to be cast on a ship. I don't think they intended this to be cast on a building, but that's an object, right?
Well, what about just on enormous creatures?
Yeah, I that feels like it should be a larger, smaller creature or a larger, smaller target is where I feel like this spell should exist in. Written to make it easily fit within the bounds of the game. But because it doesn't, you can do some nifty stuff.
You can
Can you
cast
imagine
Enlarge on the Kraken.
Yeah, and then you have a 128-foot Kraken. What's it gonna do? It can't hit you anymore. It's too big. It can't see you.
I was thinking more like maybe you beast bond it first or something. Or
And then
dominate
it'll have
monster.
advantage on the creatures within 5 feet of you,
Yes.
not within the 128 feet of it.
Oh.
Yep, wacky applications. I think that's where the spells are this coolest. I think it's a kind of lame that it's bad. I'm gonna say it. I think it's bad in the low tiers. Maybe I'm wrong. I hope I'm wrong. I hope players have found cool ways to do this. Tell us in the comments.
Oh yes, please do. This would be a fun one. I would
Yeah.
like to hear your stories.
There have to be some cool stories that I just
Oh,
haven't
yeah.
seen come to fruition.
All right, well, you got a rating?
I think this is unfortunately a 2. Like, I want to like it more, but a concentration effect for a minute that only is a D4 damage with downside more than upside isn't something I'm really thrilled about. And outside of the really niche applications of making enormous things happen, which I think would very quickly be the DM be like, oh, wait, yeah, I don't see it being all that game warping. You might find a use for it here or there. It gets a little neat creative tool. It's cute. I just don't think it's that practical.
I'm gonna go with a 4. I think there will be. It will reward your imagination, not even in the ridiculous things, just things that's appropriate for it. But commenters justify that. All right, that was Enlarge Reduce. Thank you, Sam, and thank you everyone for joining us. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye. Thank you for watching. If you found this helpful, informative, or entertaining, I'd really appreciate it if you hit the like button below. You needn't smash it. A gentle tap will suffice. If you want to see more videos like this, subscribe to the channel. And make sure you check out the links in the description, where you'll find my Caverns and Creatures series of comedy fantasy novels, Sam's full review of the spell, and other fun things.